What's up, .NET developers? Do you have an app and you want to host it on AWS in a virtual machine or virtual private server sort of setup? Well, in this video, we're going to go over two of those options, Amazon Elastic Cloud Compute or EC2 and Amazon Lightsail. So let's take a look at some of those options today on AWS for the .NET developer. Hey everyone, another edition of AWS for the .NET developer. I'm Isaac Levin, and if you're liking the content that you're seeing here, be sure to like, subscribe, and share with everybody that you think could take advantage of it. And if there's other content that you'd love to see or other topics, be sure to let me know. So today we're going to talk about in the situation where we have an app, a .NET app specifically, and we want to host it in an environment that we might be familiar with. If we're familiar with building apps on premise, we have virtual machines or other servers that, maybe they're Windows servers that have IIS on them, maybe they're Linux servers that have Nginx or something else on there. We want more control. We want control over the environment. We've talked about Elastic Beanstalk. If you haven't seen that, check out that video. If you want a more managed environment or a managed configuration. In this video, we're going to be talking about if you want more flexibility and more control. And there's two options for you. And let's get started talking about two of those two options right now. So the first option is Amazon Elastic Compute Cloud, or EC2 for short. What EC2 is are their general purpose virtual machines that you can configure to your heart's content. You can specify, a template or the flavor of operating system, and we support all sorts of different versions of Linux as well as Windows Server. And it gives you a ton of flexibility to configure the software that you want on the machine, the underlying hardware specifications of that machine, and configure it and patch it to your heart's content. You also have the ability with Amazon EC2 to auto scaling to configure the scale of your apps. So when you're building enterprise grade, really highly scalable applications, you can take advantage of some of the great things that are coming from that EC2 elastic scaling. Also, one thing that's really, really important to call out is you have this ability with spot instances of EC2 to have a ton of flexibility as it pertains to cost savings. So, and there's a huge amount of free tier options as well. If you're not familiar with Amazon or AWS free tier, it's where in the situation with EC2, if you're on the micro EC2 instances, you can get a year of that VM for free. So really, really exciting stuff. So that's EC2. Another really interesting option to talk about as well is Amazon Lightsail. So Amazon Lightsail, they're pre-configured development stack. So they have blueprints for Node.js, Nginx. For on the Windows side, they have Windows Server 2022, and basically it's a one-click environment generation tool, and it's a virtual private server still. So you have the ability to remote into it, SSH into it to your heart's content to control it. But it's really ideal for spinning up, temporary or test ephemeral environments where you need to build them up and tear them down pretty easily. I know we're talking about virtual machines right now, but Amazon Lightsail also is a great option for deploying containers too, because you can specify container instances and get a ton of the value out from the container space. Amazon Lightsail also comes with more simplified load balancing as well as CDN distribution. So the ability to make sure that no matter where your customers are, your application is always going to be snappy, always going to respond. And in the situation where you might outgrow the capabilities of Lightsail, you have an easy or seamless upgrade path to EC2. So that's one really great thing to call out. Maybe start in Lightsail, and then as you get more mature in your app's development, going up to EC2 to fit your heart content. And as it pertains to building or running or creating .NET apps on EC2 and Lightsail, like I mentioned, there are tons of processor and operating options. You can deploy to x86 or 64 or ARM and different flavors of Linux, Windows as well. So Windows Server 2012 to 2022 is currently supported. That's the .NET framework and IIS pre-installed on it. You have the option to do something like web deploy if you're familiar with deploying applications via Visual Studio Web Deploy that particular way. And then installing .NET is as simple as running some of the scripts that are for your specific OS that are provided by Microsoft. So, if you're using apt-get, if you're like on Ubuntu, for instance, you can apt-get install the SDK. If you want a more manual approach, here's a code snippet of downloading a tarball of the .NET SDK from Microsoft's CDN, and then basically adding this particular paths of where .NET is located to your path variables. So it gives you a ton of flexibility as it pertains to what version of .NET you want to have on that machine, as well as kind of maintaining that experience of that full customized flexibility that we were talking about. So you're probably thinking, what is the decision tree between EC2 and Lightsail? So from my perspective, I think if you want to use EC2 or you're considering EC2, there are some of the things that you want to consider. If you have an enterprise-grade application that needs to scale, EC2 is a great option for you. Also, if you want full control and you want to fully manage the operating system, EC2 is a great option. If also you need that flexibility and customization that comes along with that full control and the ability to auto scale really seamlessly, EC2 is a great option. And finally, like I mentioned a bit earlier, if you are already familiar with managing virtual machines, maybe you have a fleet of Windows VMs in your own environment, spinning up an EC2 instance is that exact same experience. If you're going forward with Windows Server EC2 instances. When you want to consider Lightsail is, for instance, if you have a simple app that you just want to get out there and deploy it to the cloud, right? The environment or the experience of creating a Lightsail instance and deploying to it is very, very straightforward, and it's also low cost. So it gives you the opportunity to play around with managing virtual private servers in the cloud without bearing the weight of a larger VM. You also have this ability, like I mentioned, about creating these temporary environments. So if you want to create temporary environments that you need to be able to spin up, tear down effectively, like if you have test environments, Lightsail is a great option for you. And if you don't need all of the metrics and scale that I'm talking about what you get with EC2 out of the box, Lightsail might be a great option for you. And let's take a look at a quick demo of just creating an EC2 instance and installing and building a .NET app on it. Now let's look at an example of setting up a .NET 6 application on an Elastic Cloud Computer EC2 instance. So here I am in the AWS console, and I can go to my recently visited, or I could use the search bar and search for EC2. And it's going to take me to the EC2 dashboard, where I can take a look at all the instances that I have running. Currently, I don't have any instances running, so I can actually go to this button, click Launch Instances. And that's going to walk me through launching or creating a new EC2 instance. Let's just give this a name. Let's just call this .NET on AWS. And then I'm going to scroll down and I can take a look and it'll ask me what image or what operating system I'd like to use for my host, for my instance itself. I can actually click here to browse more AMIs. And I have this option here for free tier only, and this will specify only operating systems that I can get for a year. So these are free tier eligible, which is super exciting. So all EC2 instances of this particular size you can get for a year, which is awesome. And as you can see here, there's Amazon's version of Linux, there's Red Hat, SUSE, Ubuntu, even Microsoft Server and Debian. So I'm going to go and choose Ubuntu Server 20.04 LTS. Let's do that. Select there. And the next thing I want to do is I want to specify that it's a T2 micro instance type. So that was the free tier eligible one that I mentioned earlier. The next thing is I want to specify a key pair. So in order to install the .NET runtime or the .NET SDK in this sense, or create an application or build one, and I want to be able to SSH into it. So how I do that is I specify a new key pair. So I can create a new key pair here. I can give it a name. Let's just call this SSH for right now, and specify that it's going to be a PEM file, and I'm going to create a key pair. And that's going to download that PEM file to my downloads folder. So I can go back here, and then the next step is the network settings. So in this particular sense, I want this EC2 instance is going to have a web application on it. So I want to ensure that HTTPS and HTTP traffic are allowed. So I'm going to check both these boxes here. I also, like I mentioned earlier, want to allow SSH traffic because I'm going to SSH into it. So I can specify any IP address can SSH into it, or I can specify my IP address. I'm going to click my IP address. And then I can continue scrolling down. I can configure additional storage if I want to, or even some more advanced details. Like I can domain join it, specify the DNS, and specify different behaviors for stopping and starting and recovering, things like that. So as you can see here on the summary tab, we have an Ubuntu server 20.04 T2 micro server type. It's created a new security group. I'm going to click launch instance. What it's going to do is it's going to create that security group like I mentioned, and it's going to start provisioning that EC2 instance. So if I click on that, it'll show me all the instances that I have. This is again my EC2 dashboard, the instance. So the instance state here, it's in pending state. Eventually it's going to be available. So we're going to fast forward a little bit to get to that point where we can actually start using and working against this instance. The state is now running, we can actually connect to this EC2 instance using SSH, install the .NET SDK, and go forward in building our .NET application. So we can click this connect button here, and this will take us to the instructions for connecting to it via SSH. So the first step is obviously relocate the private key file, which is in our downloads folder. If we need to, we have to alter the permissions of that file, and then finally connect. But in this case, since we're running on Windows, we can actually just SSH in there. So right now I'm in my downloads folder, and if I just paste that I just copied, and then I accept the fingerprint, and it'll add me to my hosts, and then here we are. We are in SSH into this EC2 instance, so I could do something like uname-a, and as you can see here, it's Ubuntu and all that information that we wanted earlier. So what I want to be able to do now is I want to be able to install the .NET SDK on this particular EC2 instance, which again is Ubuntu 20.04. And I can actually go to the documentation for .NET and get all the pertinent scripts that I need to be able to do that. And since I'm going to be using apt-get, I need to download the .db file for Ubuntu 20.04, and then I'm going to install that D package. I'm just copying this from the doc, so apologies for that. So this is going to, again, unpack that, and then I'm just going to remove that file that I just downloaded. And then the next step that I need to do is I need to just do a sudo apt-get update to make sure that I have the latest version of the apt-get store. And then the last step that I do after this is complete is install the .NET SDK. So it's going to go through, and this might take a second or so. And now that we have the .NET SDK installed, I can just clear out my console here, and I can just do .NET info and confirm that I have 6.09 of the .NET SDK, as well as the particular runtimes installed. So the next thing that I want to do is I want to just create just a simple .NET API that I'm going to expose over the internet that I can actually query from any other machine. So right here, I'm still SSH'd in, and I just want to, let's just do .NET new web API, and let's specify an output. Let's call the output .NET on AWS. So all this is going to do is it's going to create a new web API in a separate folder that I just specified. So I can do it there here, and then let's just cd into that. Oops. cd into that. And then the next thing, all that I need to do is I need to, I can just run this particular project using .NET Run. So I can .NET Run in here. And in this particular case, I want to specify the particular URLs that are going to be that my application is going to run under. So I'm just going to do that, and that command looks like this. So actually, it doesn't look like just like that. Copy and paste error there. So I'm going to specify, and the URLs basically means that the HTTP endpoint is going to be under port 5000, and the HTTPS endpoint is going to be under port 5001. So if I run this, it's going to build my app, and then it's going to actually run it. And if I wanted to, I could actually spin up another session, SSH session, and query this particular API. But instead, what I want to do is I want to access this via the internet. So let's do this. Let's go back to the EC2 console, and then I'm going to go and look at our instance. And then if I scroll down to the security tab, I'm actually going to open up that 5001 port. So I can do that here by clicking on the security group. And then if you scroll down to inbound rules, you'll see here where we have some inbound rules. I can edit them, and I can create a new custom rule custom TCP and go 5000 to 5001. And under that, I want to specify the IP address of my machine, like so. Then I'm going to save that rule. And now, if I go back to EC2 and take a look at this particular EC2 instance, I can actually open up the address. That's not going to work. But if I add 5001 weather forecast, it's going to say, oh, it's not private because I don't have an SSL cert. But if I continue forward, there, as you can see, under the 5001, I can actually then, if I wanted to, use the non-HTTPS endpoint, which is 5000, and I get the same thing. So as you can see, really quick example of being able to stand up a .NET API inside of an Amazon EC2 instance very quickly. In all practical purposes, you would probably want to use Nginx or something else. If you're running Ubuntu or another version of Linux, or if you're in Windows, you'd be using IIS to host your application. You can use Kestrel as well, which is what we're doing in this case, but you do have options. As we wrap up the video, I think it's really great to talk about, you have all these options with EC2 and Lightsail, and I love to see some of the stuff that you're creating on top of these platforms. So again, if you're liking the content here, like and subscribe, share along, let me know if there's other things that you want me to talk about, and we'll see you next time on AWS for the .NET Developer. Take care.